Okay, so that's the main stages of the painting completed now. Everything's gone pretty well. I have realised on putting the undercarriage on, because of the added weight that the resin nose gives you, it would probably be, this would be a good situation to get the metal undercarriage. Eduard do a set and a few other people do a set. They're fine, they take it, but you've got to kind of, when you put it down, you've got to kind of lift it up and let it settle again. Because they will splay out slightly, but like I said, you can correct it as long as it's almost like the first time you put it down. You want to just be careful as you're doing it. Tail wheel first, for instance, and then just come down on the two, and then you'll have it won't spread out, but it is spreading a little bit if you do it a bit heavy-handedly like you conventionally would. No problems with the painting. It seems a simple scheme, and I suppose it is in one sense, but there's always a bit more to it, and because it's just such a block of colour, I've tried to break it up with the sort of pre-shading effect, which I think's worked quite well. But also, you know, you've got to mask up the white areas, and then you've got a little bit of complex masking around the front there as well with the exhausts. But it's all straight edges, and it's pretty simple stuff to do. You just got to kind of work for it. I've painted the propeller and nose cone there as well, so as I said, the back plate just black, and I looked at some references and I couldn't see that the 109s were actually painted black on the back side, so I've left them silver. There is a little bit of texture to all of these resin parts. I'm just kind of working with it. I mean, you could have sanded it back. I don't want to go quite to that level. I'm just trying to practice clean finishes on this. This isn't like, you know, a showpiece or anything. And yeah, the metal, and obviously the MRP as well, because it's basically like spraying alkalides, the MRP. It does show up a bit of the texture, but you know, it's fine. It's just something to bear in mind when it comes to using these parts of resin. So I am going to put the propeller on now, and it does fit very well with all the slight sort of changes that we did. I'm just wondering whether to put it on with PVA glue or super glue. You get a more instant bond with super glue, and PVA glue isn't the strongest, but just wondering about having that movement to be able to get the final touch. You know, having super glue, I almost have to put it straight on where it needs to be, and it's going to be quite easy to be off centre a little bit. I don't know, we'll see. I'll make a decision on that. But yeah, so now we're running on to the decals. We're doing this one down here, 68. So you could mask these. This is one of the simplest schemes to mask. It would be very easy, but like I said, I want to use these decals so you get an idea of it, so we go right the way through on this build. So yeah, that's all we're looking at, and I'm going to use a few stencils off of the Eduard sheet, but not all of them. So what I'm probably going to do is just try and cut around some of this just loosely, and just trying to get rid of some of that carrier film, and then we'll see how the decals go down. Okay, so I've let these decals sit now with some microsol for about 2 hours, and all I've done is I've just put them in place, put 1 dose of micro set on just to get them to bind in. That sort of helps them stick, and then I've applied a first set of microsol, like I said, and that helps soften the decal and try and get it to suck into some of this detail. And that's going to be quite a tall order in this because we've got quite fine rivets, so not sure how that's going to go. We might have to go back over with the riveter if they don't suck down very well. So looking at it here, got the first one on these wings. They are very much down on the surface, but they haven't sucked into the detail very much at all. A bit better on the underside here. Yeah, they're not too bad at all, both sides. And then the stuff on the side of the fuselage, they've probably sucked down the best. I can see some of the rivet detail coming through them. Yeah, they're no problem at all. This white decal here, not so much. And then I've just put on a bit of stenciling data. After looking at some of the reference pictures, I've got quite a good book on the subject, which is this one. A lot of the 109s didn't have much of the rivet data, much stencil data at all. They didn't have the wing walks or anything like that. There is actually a very good close-up picture of this insignia here, which is from JG88, and you can see that the stencil data at the top for the grab handle is present. There's also a couple that are flying, and they've got the petrol hazard sign there, which is in a different side. On the E's, it's on this side, the far side, but on these, it's I've actually scribed one in there. You can't see it very well, but it is there. And so I've got that warning triangle there, and that was about it. So as far as stencil's concerned, that's pretty good. There's a little bit of silvering on this side, I've just noticed in the light, so I can sort that out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut through these decals in the panel lines and try and apply another dose of microsol and try and get the decals into the details. So I've got the decals on and done all the finishing touches to this one now, and I'm pretty pleased how it's coming together. Now all I did do, you'll see that you'll know that I mentioned about the propeller blades being a little bit rough. Let's see if I can show you here. And I did decide to sand them back, mask it all over again, and then spray them, and I think that was well worth doing because I'm a lot happier with how they look now. So I'm struggling with the light here a bit, if you just bear with me. There we go. So yeah, they are absolutely very smooth now, and if I show you the back, which I didn't sand, you might be able to see the roughness. You see it's not as smooth, it's a little bit rough. Not so concerned about that because you can't see it as well, but just to highlight, that's what the propeller's like. So really, before you glue them on, it might be worth just giving the blades a bit of a sand and trying to keep that contour that they've got, which is quite well replicated. There's a sort of twist. So yeah, all that's left now is to stick a couple of decals on there, which are the Hamilton standard logo, which is seen in all the pictures and not in this kit. And then we're ready to, I'm going to clear coat the decals just to protect them, not the rest of it, because we're straight onto MRP lacquer, and then we should be into weathering. And as you can see, the decals have sort of picked up the riveting a little bit. The black ones are a lot thinner. This white one that's obviously got a white backing is a much thicker decal, and I've struggled to pick out all of the riveting, but it is there. I have done it. I mean, you can't really see it here, but I'm looking at the actual model, and these lines of rivets here do come through the decal. So hopefully once we get some oils in there, they'll actually show through in the decal. And again for this side, I used a couple of the stencils from the kit, just ones that I could see in pictures. There weren't masses of stencils, not like an actual like a World War II aircraft. It didn't seem to be so many on there. And I also forgot to mention, adding this rod. This is some 0.5 mil rod, just painted silver and then stuck in there, because that, I believe in the Profi pack you get etched metal for that, but in the weekend edition, which is what I converted, I didn't actually have anything to go in there, so just want to get those rods there, which are the I forget the name, but they pull the rudder, so they run on right through into the cockpit. So that's all looking pretty good, and as you can see, the finish is quite good all the way along, and I'm pretty pleased with it, to be honest. It's looking pretty good. Now, I've mentioned adding some decals to the propeller, and what I'll be using is this set from Cora Decals, and this one uses Hamilton Standard logos, so it's these two here. So it's an American made propeller, it seems, and I'm not going to show this on camera because I've just done a review of these, and I've shown in the review putting the decals on the Junkers JU87 Stuka propeller here, so I go through how they actually work. They're perfectly fine, they're just not pre-cut, so you have to cut around them, so a little bit tricky when it comes to this oval, but as long as I'm careful it should be okay. And then we'll get them on the propeller and check in when the weathering begins. I think that would be the next step on this, so I'll see you in that part. So closing in on the finish line with this one now. I haven't filmed the weathering that I've done because I wasn't really sure where I was going to go with it. I've just basically used 4 or 5 different types of pigments, a couple of earth colours and a soot pigment as well to do from the exhaust, and I've also actually gone back and used some of the Flory wash just afterwards. So once the pigment had gone down, because it's water based, the oil tends to turn the pigments into sort of sludge if you use an oil based thing, or enamel based one. But with that, I could just, as it dried to a dusty pigment anyway, so I just sort of redefined some of the panel lines that I wasn't quite happy with, and then as there was extra of the wash outside of the panel lines, I just sort of rubbed it in with a cloth, and I think it's getting to where I want it to be now. I don't want it to be too dirty, I just want it to look dusty. These 109s in Spain weren't really dirty, they weren't there long enough. It's not like World War II aircraft where they were hammered hard and they were used constantly and they were always being overused. Sorry, I have got quite a lot of close-up pictures of these 109s, and I wouldn't go as far as saying they're clean, but all the Condor Legion aircraft wasn't massively used. By the time these 109s started getting there in sort of 37, there wasn't a ton of air war going on as far as there would be if you thought of something like Battle of Britain or the invasion of France and things like that. So they weren't used hugely, but obviously they did get a bit of wear and tear, and they did get a lot of dust because they were based in a desert. So I've tried to go more towards the dust. Not a lot of chipping, because again, looking at the reference pictures, there just is none over the whole aircraft. They're almost perfectly clean. And you've got to remember, a lot of these aircraft as well didn't even get many kills. They weren't even in action as far as shooting down things. There were some quite good fighter pilots in the 109s, and Mulder's aircraft is a well-known one who did get quite a lot of kills. But again, this one, I'm not sure if it's got any kills throughout its time, this 68 as I've done here, and that's the same for quite a lot. And certainly when you get into the E's, they're later again, and as you start getting into 38, 39, I mean the war is pretty much winding down then. There's just sort of fighting around Madrid and a few other pockets. So you've got to bear that in mind. Sometimes it's a bit of a cop-out when you say, they were hardly used with Second World War aircraft, because they do tend to look banged up no matter how much they were used. But this is a much different scenario, so you've got to bear in mind with that. And when we've got good references like I've got, I think it's important to try and sort of aim towards those. So with that in mind, I hope this looks pretty good and is somewhere where I want it to be, and I'm happy with it personally. I'm going to put it on a little base, but I won't show you that in the video because that's pretty much irrelevant as far as the build's concerned. So yeah, I mean, enjoyable build, learning curve, quite difficult as far as from my point of view, not having much experience when it comes to 1/32 aircraft, so having this full-on resin engine here and you know, was a bit of an issue, but I worked around it and I'm quite pleased that I did, and I think everything is sort of come together now, and I think it does look pretty good. Now one of the finishing touches is this canopy, which you can obviously see here. I'm just not sure how I'm going to do it. I might leave it off like this, and so that it can be placed on as well, because I kind of like the lines of it with the canopy on, but at the same time, you know, I might open it up and then it will be glued like that. And if that's the case, there's a little arm that holds the canopy out when it's like this, so I will probably just make that up from plastic card. But yeah, all in all, everything's gone extremely well. I'm very pleased with it, and I like the look of it, and I think it's a great addition to my collection, and could well be worth a go if you're interested in doing something a little bit different in 1/32 scale. So I'm going to leave you now with some pictures, and some good close-up pictures, and try and get quite a lot of detail on there, and that will include some of the touches I've just mentioned, and hope you enjoyed the build. If you like what you saw, please like the video, put a comment down below. I always like to read the comments, and if not already, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.